They charged down the aisle towards James, who turned and ran out of the church. We heard several gunshots, but later found out that no one had been shot. I had no idea what was going on, and I was so confused. Apparently, James had jumped into his car and sped away, and the police gave chase. The local news network got word that the police were involved in a high-speed chase, and they dispatched a helicopter to follow the chase. Growing up, I always thought that my wedding day would be a magical affair. I had dreamed that it would be full of dancing and fine dining, gifts, cocktails, and of course the man that would be the love of my life. But if you had told me that my wedding day would be as chaotic as it turned out to be, then I would have called you a liar. Although after hearing what happened, you might just think that I had made the whole thing up. At any rate, I suppose I should start at the beginning. My name is Tanya, and I'm 24 years old. I met my fiancé James about 2 years ago, and while it hasn't always been the picture-perfect relationship, it has been quite wonderful, actually. From the day we met, he has always been romantic and has gotten me flowers every week since I've known him. I've worked as an accountant ever since I graduated from college, and James has worked as a car salesman. My parents were very disgusted with James' job, and sure, it wasn't anything special, but it paid well. And James really appeared to be good at his job, as he had a very large house that was entirely paid for, and he drove a gorgeous luxury car. I tried so many times to get them to respect him. After all, what he did for a living didn't really matter, as he was a good man and provided well for me. He could have worked at a fast food restaurant for all I cared, so long as he was a good and loving man, and James very much was.
Why on earth are you engaged to such an awful man?
Dad, James is not an awful man. He's a wonderful provider and partner.
Provider? Just think about how he makes his money, though. He swindles people by selling broken-down cars. All used car salesmen are sleazy.
It was so aggravating that my parents thought so poorly of James, and it didn't help that James had no interest in what they thought. He wasn't interested in trying to change their minds at all. Oh, hon, what can we do? There must be a way to make my parents understand how wonderful you are.
Why? They're allowed to not like me, and it doesn't matter if they do or don't. So long as you love me, then I have all that I need.
I know, but it would just make things so much easier if they did.
Well, we can't magically change their minds. Oh, and I wanted to let you know that I will have to head across the country to pick up a bunch of cars.
Really? Can't you send someone else?
Sadly, no. I need to go to make sure the deal goes smoothly, and I'll only be gone for about a week.
It wasn't the first time that he had to go on such trips, but as we were getting closer to the date of our marriage, the more of an inconvenience it became. The day after James left, though, a detective came to the house, and the whole interaction left me very confused. He knocked on my front door, and when I answered, he had questions for me.
Hello there. I'm Detective Kirby, and I was just wondering if I could ask you and James a few questions. Is he home?
Hi there. No, James isn't here.
Oh, that's no problem. Could you tell me where he is?
Yeah, he went to go pick up several used cars.
Does he travel often to pick up cars?
Yes, sometimes he does.
Have you ever traveled with him for these trips?
No. I have my own job, and I can't go on trips like that as often as he does.
I see. Well, I'll give you my business card. And if you could have James give me a call when he returns, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
I took the card and said goodbye to him, but was left feeling very uncomfortable. When James came home, I handed him the card and asked him why the police wanted to speak to him, but he brushed it off. Apparently, sometimes when he would buy cars from certain dealerships, that parts of the cars could be stolen, or even the cars themselves, and he had had to prove that all the cars that he had purchased and sold were legitimate. It sounded kind of odd, but I had no reason to doubt him. That night when we were getting ready for bed, though, I noticed that he had several bruises on his back and side, along with a large cut that was stitched up. Oh my God, James. What on earth happened?
Oh, this. It's nothing. One of the dealerships had a staircase that led up to their offices, and I slipped and fell down the stairs. It looks much worse than it actually is.
It looks pretty bad. Please try to be more careful in the future. Oh, and we will need to make some deposits for the wedding venue, the band, and the catering in a few days.
Oh, that's not a problem.
A few days later, we went to see our wedding organizer, and James handed her a large stack of money to cover all the deposits. I had no idea where he had gotten all that money, but I just assumed that it was from the deal that he had just made recently. Everywhere we went, he used cash to buy things. From the restaurant that we went to when we got groceries, and then later when we booked our honeymoon. We were planning on going to Europe for a 4-week trip through several countries, and James paid for the whole trip with cash, and it cost over $20,000. Hey, I'm just wondering, where did you get all that cash?
What do you mean? It's all from my work.
Okay, you just have a lot of cash on hand. You could put most of it on credit and that would be okay. Doesn't it worry you to carry that much cash on you?
No, but I like to live a bit dangerously. And hey, I hate to do this since our wedding is only a week away, but I need to go on another business trip.
Seriously? Will you be back in time?
Oh, of course, yes. And I wouldn't dream of going on a trip this close to the wedding, but this is just such a good deal that I can't pass it up. The money I'll make from this deal will be completely worth it.
I was so worried that he wouldn't be back in time. While he was gone, I went over to my parents for a visit and we ended up going for a walk. While on the walk, we started talking.
Where is James?
On a business trip, but he'll be back in a few days.
Are you so sure about that?
Yes, Dad, I'm sure that he'll come back. As we were talking, I noticed that we were being followed by Detective Kirby. Even though he was being sneaky, both my father and I noticed him.
Who is that guy following us?
That's a detective.
The police? Why are they following us? Does it have to do with James?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I don't know, but it's very odd.
See, I knew that James was no good. He's probably stealing cars.
Dad, he is not stealing cars. But yes, it is rather odd. I'll have to have a serious conversation with James about it when he gets back. I'm sure that there is a good reason for it. The next day, James came home and he walked into the house carrying a pair of large black duffel bags. He gave me a kiss and went to get changed. Later that night, we went out to dinner and had a wonderful time. The next few days before the wedding, everything was coming together perfectly. The weather was looking like it was going to be perfect. Then on day we were to be married, I went to the church to get ready. James and I didn't see each other right up until when my father got ready to reluctantly walk me down the aisle. James looked incredibly handsome standing up next to the priest, waiting for me to join him at the front of the church to say our vows. When suddenly his smile faded, and I was pushed aside harshly by Detective Kirby, who was followed by several police officers. They charged down the aisle towards James, who turned and ran out of the church. We heard several gunshots, but later found out that no one had been shot. I had no idea what was going on, and I was so confused. Apparently, James had jumped into his car and sped away, and the police gave chase. The local news network got word that the police were involved in a high-speed chase, and they dispatched a helicopter to follow the chase. James managed to avoid them for several hours, but he was eventually captured and was dragged to jail. Over the course of the next few days, it came out that James only used his car dealership as a front, and whenever he went for business trips, that he was actually robbing banks. I couldn't believe it. I thought I had known who James actually was, and yet he had hidden where he was actually getting his money from. He had completely lied about who he actually was. After he was arrested, police came and searched our house, but when they didn't find anything, they left. When the trial began, it was obvious that the police had James dead to rights and had a mountain of evidence against him. Thankfully, no one had ever been hurt during any of his robberies, so the court took a bit of leniency on him for that fact. They did sentence him to prison for 20 years, though. It was such a harsh blow, and what was worse was that I was never allowed to talk to him at all in all this time. It wasn't until he had been sent to prison that I was allowed to visit him. When I did, he apologized for never telling me about how he really made his money, and that he would understand if I wouldn't wait for him. In fact, that he actually encouraged me to move on. He also leaned in close and whispered that the house and everything in it was now mine, and that I should move our bed and lift the rug when I got home. Confused, I left and went home and did as he had told me to do, and when I moved the bed and rug, I noticed that one floorboard looked a bit different than the rest. Testing it, I found that it was loose, and when I lifted it up, I found a hidden compartment in the floor that had several duffel bags in it, just like the ones that James had carried into the house just before the wedding. When I looked inside, They were full of money, and I realized that there must have been a few $1,000,000 in them. So that's where I am at the moment, trying to decide if I should just keep the money and not tell the police, or if I should report it. But even beyond that, I now have to decide if I even want to wait for James or if I will eventually move on. I have some hard decisions to make, I guess. What do you think? What should I do?